3 days after I bought a villa in Spain, I realized the same dented white van was behind me at the grocery store, the hardware shop, even when I drove out of town just to clear my head. At first I told myself it was a coincidence, until I caught the driver parked outside my gate at 2 a.m., engine off, lights out, just watching my house. That was the night I stopped being a confused tourist and started planning revenge. If you were being followed in a foreign country and then discovered your own family might be behind it, what would you do? If you read this to the end, tell me in the comments if I went too far. And if you think I didn't go far enough, I'd like to hear that too. My name is Richard Hale. I'm 72 years old, retired structural engineer from Austin, Texas, and a grandfather of 4 noisy, brilliant kids who are the only reason I didn't give up after my wife died. I spent 45 years making sure other people's buildings didn't fall down, then watched my own life crumble in less than 5. When the grief finally stopped knocking me flat every morning, I did something my son called insane and my daughter called selfish. I sold the Austin house, liquidated some investments, and bought a sun-faded, lemon-scented villa on the coast of Spain. I thought I was buying peace. Instead, I bought a war I never saw coming. The villa sat on a hill outside a small town near Valencia, white stucco walls and a red tile roof like a postcard someone had forgotten to take down. A narrow road curled up from the main highway, lined with orange trees and low stone walls. The real estate agent kept saying muy tranquilo and perfect for retirement, and I believed him because I wanted to. I moved in June. The air smelled like salt and hot dust. The first night I sat on the terrace with a glass of cheap Rioja, listening to crickets and the distant thump of music from some beach bar down the hill. For the first time since my wife Laura died, I felt something like relief. The van showed up on day 2. I noticed it outside the supermercado first. A tired white Ford Transit with a scrape down one side and a back door that didn't quite close all the way. Spanish plates, a little rust around the wheel wells, windshield so dirty it looked frosted. I parked my rental car, Silver Seat Ibiza, ugly little thing, but it ran, and when I came out with bags of groceries, the van rolled past slowly, driver's side window down just enough that I could see a cigarette and the shadow of a beard. Nothing special, right? You see vans like that everywhere. Work vans, delivery vans. I told myself that twice on the drive home. The second time was harder to ignore. I went to the ferreteria, the hardware store, to buy a new lock set for the front door because the old one felt loose. When I pulled into the gravel lot, the van was already there, backed into a corner, no logo, no ladder racks, just sitting. Nobody inside. I spent 20 minutes inside arguing in broken Spanish and worse hand gestures about screws and drill bits. When I came back out, the van had moved. Now it was parked 2 spaces over from me, nose pointed toward the exit. Coincidence, I muttered, starting my car. My voice sounded thin in the cramped cabin. On the way back, every time I checked my rearview mirror, the van sat exactly 3 cars behind me. When I turned off toward my hill road, it went straight. I laughed at myself then, an old man with too much imagination and not enough actual problems. That illusion lasted 3 days. The villa was half furnished when I bought it. Sun-faded sofas, a lumpy mattress, a dining table that wobbled if you breathed on it too hard. I spent my mornings unpacking and my afternoons exploring. Little cafes, the beach, a market that sold fresh fish I didn't know how to cook. On the 4th afternoon, I drove 30 minutes inland just to see something different. Vineyards, dusty hills, a church whose bells rang slightly out of tune. I parked in the town square, had a coffee that tasted like burnt tar, and watched a couple of kids kick a soccer ball hard enough to dent a car. I stayed until sunset. On the dark drive back, headlights filled my mirror, a single pair that never passed, never faded, never fell back. When I slowed down, they slowed. When I sped up, they sped up. At the turnoff to my hill road, the headlights disappeared. I turned onto the narrow lane and felt the skin between my shoulder blades tighten like someone had just touched a cold coin to my spine. When I pulled up to my gate and reached to punch in the 4-digit code for the new lock, I heard an engine somewhere below, idling, then going quiet. I shut the gate and stood there in the dark, listening. Crickets. The distant whoosh of a car on the main highway. Nothing else. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself a lot of things that week. Every morning my son Michael texted from Denver. "How's the new life, Dad? Send pics. Try not to get scammed." My daughter Amy sent fewer messages, but each one carried more weight. "Did you sign the Spanish will the lawyer suggested? Have you set up power of attorney yet? We should get that sorted before something happens." Something happens meant before you die and leave us to untangle the mess. She worked in finance, in Boston, and spoke fluent anxiety. On the 7th day, the van parked directly across from my gate. I saw it from the kitchen window while I made coffee, the boxy shape half hidden by mimosa trees, nose angled toward my driveway. The driver sat behind the wheel, sunglasses on even though the morning sun hadn't cleared the ridge yet. He looked like every workman I'd ever hired and none of them at the same time. Mid-40s, dark hair, thin frame, cigarette angled out of the window between two fingers that didn't look like they'd done much actual labor. I stepped out onto the terrace, my old knees protesting, and stared back down the hill. He didn't react. No wave, no nod, no motion to drive away. I considered walking down there, asking him in halting Spanish what the hell he wanted. Instead, I went back inside and grabbed my phone. I took 3 pictures through the slats of the shutters, zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. Then I called Michael. "Dad, you're on speaker," he said. In the background, I heard dishes, the beeping of a microwave, one of my grandsons arguing about a cartoon. "We're just getting breakfast. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said, lying with the ease that comes from too many years of pretending to be stronger than you feel. "I just sent you some pictures. Tell me what you see." A pause, then the soft buzz of incoming texts on his end. "I see a van," he said. "Why?" "I've seen it 3 times this week." "And?" "And it's parked outside my gate right now." Another pause, longer this time. "Dad," he said finally, "you moved to a tourist town. There are vans, workmen, delivery, maintenance, whatever. You can't assume every guy in a van is following you. What if I told you I saw it at the grocery store, the hardware store, and on the highway out of town? I'd say you're noticing it now because you're alone and on edge." His tone softened. "You've been through a lot this year. New country, new house. It's normal to feel off." My grip tightened on the phone. "I spent 30 years inspecting bridges and high-rises," I said. "My job was to notice small things before they became catastrophic. I know the difference between coincidence and pattern." "Dad, we're not there. We can't see it. Maybe talk to the local police?" "What are they called? Guardia Civil? Ask them to drive by. But please don't go charging down there trying to play hero." We hung up with promises of video calls and pictures of the grandkids. I didn't call the police. Instead, I called the real estate agent. "Senor Hale," he boomed when he picked up. "Everything bien? Is the house okay?" "There's a van outside," I said. "White, old, been around all week. Is that normal?" A beat of silence stretched too long. "In Spain, many work vans," he said carefully. "Maybe they repair the road. Maybe, electricity." "There are no logos," I said. "No company name. And he's not doing any work. He just sits there." Another pause. "If you are worried, you call Guardia Civil," he said quickly. "They know everything. Very safe here, senor. Do not worry. Spain is not like your movies." When I glanced back out the window, the van was gone. That night, I dreamed of tires crunching on gravel and woke up with my heart pounding like the old Ford pickup I drove in my 20s. I walked through the villa in the dark, the tiles cool beneath my bare feet, and checked every window twice. At 2:13 a.m., a pair of headlights slid silently across my bedroom wall. I moved to the window and used a finger to lift the curtain an inch. The van sat just beyond the gate, engine off, a pale hulk in the moonlight. No lights, no movement. My phone said it would take 4 minutes for the local police to arrive. 4 minutes is an eternity if someone decides to rush your gate. Instead of calling, I stood there and watched him watch me. I couldn't see his face, but I felt his attention like a hand pressed flat against my chest. That was the night I stopped pretending this was nothing. The next morning, I drove into town and found the police station. White building, blue lettering, a Guardia Civil car parked outside with its light bar dusty from disuse. Inside, a bored young officer with a fading tattoo on his forearm listened politely while I explained, switching between English, my terrible Spanish, and hand gestures. Van Blanco, I said, tracing the shape in the air. Muchos días. Always. Aquí, aquí. I mimed the gate, the road, the headlights. I think, following. He nodded, typed something into a computer, and finally said in English, "We will patrol. Maybe is nothing. Maybe is, como se dice, vecino, neighbor, watching. Is safe here." Safe. Everyone kept using that word like it was a spell. On my way back to the villa, I stopped at a little electronics shop and bought 4 Wi-Fi cameras, the kind you can watch from your phone. One for the gate, one for the terrace, one covering the driveway, and one tucked into the corner of the living room facing the big glass doors. The salesman, a balding man in his 50s, helped me set them up. When I asked if they were easy to hack, he laughed. "Señor, everything is easy to hack," he said. "But this, no problem. Why? Genghis?" "Someone is watching my house," I said. His smile faded. "Ah," he said slowly. "Yes, better you have cameras." That afternoon, my granddaughter Lily called from Denver. She's 13, too smart for her own good, and the only one in the family who learned a bit of Spanish just to text me phrases she thought I'd need. "Are you making friends over there, Grandpa?" she asked. "Or just fighting with the coffee machine?" "I have a friend," I said. "It's just not the kind I wanted." "What do you mean?" "There's a van." "Grandpa," she interrupted, "this is starting to sound like those true crime podcasts." "Maybe it is," I said. "Maybe I'm the season finale." She laughed, but I didn't. 3 days later, I had proof. It was a Sunday. The town was full of tourists. The beach a patchwork quilt of towels and umbrellas, loud music leaking from speakers. I forced myself to relax, walked barefoot in the surf, ate grilled sardines at a beach shack, watched a group of old men argue about soccer with the intensity of generals planning a war. When I pulled out of my parking spot to head home, I checked my rearview mirror out of habit. The van pulled out too. I took the normal route at first. Roundabout, main road, past the gas station with its peeling sign. The van stayed a tidy 2 cars behind. At the next roundabout, instead of taking the exit toward home, I went straight, inland, toward a town I'd never visited. So did the van. By then my hands were slick on the steering wheel. I forced myself to breathe slowly, the way Laura used to tell me when she saw my jaw clench. At the next turn, I made a sharp right onto a narrow farm road lined with stone walls and olive trees. There was no reason for any traffic to follow me there unless they meant to. The van followed. "Okay," I said aloud, my voice surprisingly calm. "Okay, then." I drove another half-mile, then pulled onto a wide patch of dirt by the side of the road and killed the engine. The air buzzed with insects. Heat rippled off the hood. The van rolled past slowly. As it did, the driver turned his head just enough to meet my eyes. His sunglasses hid most of his face, but his mouth curled into the faintest suggestion of a smile. He drove on and disappeared around the bend. I sat there until my heartbeat slowed, watching dust settle back onto the road. Then I turned the car around and went home a different way, taking turns at random, doubling back twice, like an old spy in a bad movie. When I finally pulled up to my gate, the van was already there, waiting. He had beaten me home. That was the moment I understood someone was tracking more than my car. They knew where I lived, where I shopped, how slowly an old man could climb a hill and convince himself he was still in control. That night, I poured myself another glass of cheap wine, set my phone on the table, and opened the live feed from the gate camera. The van sat in its usual place. I took a screenshot, zoomed in until the license plate numbers blurred, then sent the picture to Amy with a short message. "This is why I haven't signed anything yet." She replied almost instantly. "Dad, this is getting paranoid. You're making yourself crazy. Just go to the police and let them handle it. And please, please, sign the Spanish power of attorney papers so I can help if something happens." There was that phrase again. If something happens. I stared at the picture of the van for a long time, then did what I should have done days earlier. I started digging. I may be 72, but I'm not helpless. I built my first computer from parts when Michael was still in diapers. I ran structural simulations on machines that filled half an office. I know my way around a search bar. The next morning, I drove into town early, before the sun got brutal, and parked 2 blocks from the square. I walked the rest of the way, hat pulled low, and sat at a cafe with a clear view of the main street. Cafe Solo, no sugar. My heart didn't need any more encouragement. At 9:17 a.m., the van rolled past, heading toward the industrial part of town, where the warehouses, repair shops, and small logistics companies lived. I threw a few euros on the table and followed on foot until I was out of sight, then hurried back to my car. My knees complained, but adrenaline does wonders for arthritis. Keeping my distance, I tailed him through 2 roundabouts and into an industrial cul-de-sac. He pulled into a lot in front of a low concrete building with a faded sign, Seguridad Levante, Security Company. I parked around the corner and watched. The driver climbed out, thin, dark hair, narrow shoulders under a blue work shirt, and went inside carrying a folder. I sat there for 10 minutes, engine off, sweat gathering under my collar, thoughts racing. Security company meant cameras, guards, maybe personal protection. Why would a security firm be following a retired American around a quiet Spanish town? I got my answer faster than I expected. The van driver came out with another man, taller, heavier, in a polo shirt with the company logo. They stood by the van and smoked, laughing about something. The heavier man took the folder, flipped it open, and held up a page. Even from a distance, I recognized the grainy image. It was a printed still from my gate camera, showing me punching in the code, my own security feed. My mouth went dry. Then the heavier man turned the page, and for a second the top of the next sheet caught the sunlight. I saw my own face again, clearer this time, in a passport-style photo, and beneath it, in bold letters, Cliente, Amy Kerrigan, Boston, USA. My daughter. That single line of text hit me harder than any van ever could. I sat frozen in my car, fingers numb against the steering wheel, watching 2 strangers laugh over a file with my life in it, while my daughter's name sat at the top like a brand. Amy. The girl who cried on my shoulder when I broke the news about Laura's cancer. The woman who flew down to Austin 3 times during chemo and claimed she couldn't take off one day for the actual funeral. The one who had been insisting for months that I sign over power of attorney and let her handle everything because international law is complicated, Dad. She had hired a security firm in Spain to follow me, to tap into my cameras, to record my routines. For what? To protect me? Or to build a case that I couldn't protect myself anymore? My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. A text from Lily. "Grandpa, did you see the sunset pics I sent?" I stared at her message while watching the men by the van close the folder and go back inside the building that now felt like the headquarters of an enemy operation. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Grief stepped aside and made room for something colder. If my own daughter thought she could turn me into a helpless old man she could manage like a bad investment, she didn't know me at all. And if she'd forgotten what I used to do for a living, planning for worst-case scenarios, then I was about to remind her. I drove back to the villa on autopilot, barely seeing the orange groves and blue slice of sea in the distance. My mind was a whiteboard filled with arrows and bullet points. First, confirm. Maybe I'd misread the name. Maybe there was another Amy Kerrigan in Boston who just happened to be my exact blood type and age. Second, find out exactly what they'd been asked to do. Surveillance? Protective detail? Something worse? Third, turn it all back on them. That afternoon I called the security company. Seguridad Levante, buenos dias, a woman answered. Hello, I said in my best formal Spanish. My name is Richard Hale. I would like to speak with, El Jefe, the boss. After a pause and some muffled conversation, a deeper voice came on the line. This is Carlos Ortega, he said in English. How may I help you? Senor Ortega, I said, I am calling about one of your vans. White Ford, license plate. I read the numbers from the screenshot I'd taken. Your men are very dedicated. They follow me everywhere. Silence. Then carefully. I'm not sure what you mean, Senor Hale. I mean that if you're going to spy on a man, you should at least tell your employees not to hold his file up in the parking lot, I said, especially the page with his daughter's name at the top. The line stayed quiet long enough that I pictured him covering the receiver, swearing, waving someone over. Perhaps we should meet in person, he said finally, to clear up any misunderstandings. I think that's an excellent idea, I said, at my villa. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. And if your men want to keep following me, they won't have far to go. I hung up before he could answer. Then I called someone else. The young Guardia Civil officer I'd spoken to days earlier answered on the second ring. Senor Hale? He said, surprised. This is the paranoid American again, I said. You asked me to call if the van came back. I'm calling. And I want you at my house tomorrow morning. Off the record if you must. On the record if you're smart. What is happening? I'm being followed by a security company hired by someone in the United States, I said. I believe they're accessing my private cameras without consent. That's illegal here too, right? Yes, he said slowly. This is serious. Very, I said. So bring whoever you need, but do me a favor and park out of sight. He hesitated, then said, Mañana, 10 en punto. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I didn't sleep much that night, but it wasn't the anxious tossing of the previous week. It was the restless pacing of a man counting down to something. Halfway through pacing notch number 42 in the living room floor, I stopped in front of Laura's picture on the mantel. You always said I spoiled them, I murmured. Maybe this is the day I finally prove you right. The next morning, the sky was a hard, cloudless blue. At 9:30, a green and white Guardia Civil car slid quietly behind a stand of trees down the hill, exactly where I'd asked them to wait. Two officers got out, the young one from before and an older man with a mustache that could have swept the floor. At 9:55, the white van came up the hill. I watched from the terrace as it stopped outside the gate. A black SUV pulled in behind it. Carlos Ortega climbed out of the SUV, crisp polo shirt, sunglasses, posture of a man used to getting his way. The van driver I'd seen all week got out too, eyes flicking over the house, the yard, the cameras. I buzzed them in before they could press the intercom. Bienvenidos, I said on the terrace, forcing a smile. Thank you for coming. Carlos took off his sunglasses, revealing dark eyes that missed very little. Senor Hale, he said, we don't usually meet our clients' subjects. This is irregular. So is someone hacking my security feed, I said. But here we are. He glanced at the nearest Wi-Fi camera, following the angle of the lens. Let's talk inside, I said, stepping aside. They walked into my living room as if they owned it, which told me a lot. Carlos sat without being invited. The van driver stayed standing, arms crossed. You told my receptionist you saw a file, Carlos said, with your daughter's name. I did, I said. And I saw your men take pictures of me at my gate, at the supermarket, on the highway. I thought Spain was supposed to be tranquilo. He spread his hands. Your daughter is worried about you, he said. She contracted our firm to ensure your safety. Nothing more. Nothing more? I asked. Then why didn't anyone tell me? Why did your man sit outside my house at 2 a.m. with his engine off? For your protection, Carlos said smoothly. There have been burglaries. Foreigners are targets. This is a courtesy. Bull? I said. You don't need to watch me buy olives to protect me from burglars. His eyes narrowed. Your daughter requested detailed reports, he admitted. She wanted to be sure you were not being exploited, that you were managing your finances well, in case we observed confusion, disorientation, signals that you needed assistance. Signals, like an old dog limping toward the end. And did you observe confusion? I asked. Have I wandered into traffic yet? The corner of his mouth twitched. Our reports are for the client, he said. Behind him, the gate camera's live feed flickered briefly on my TV, exactly as I'd set it to do 10 minutes into our meeting. 2 uniformed officers emerged from behind the trees and walked toward the house. Carlos's eyes flicked to the screen, then back to me. What is this? He asked. You're a security professional, I said. You know exactly what this is. I invited the police to our little talk, since I'm just a subject and all. The bell rang. I didn't move. Doors open, I called. The Guardia Civil officers stepped in, nodding politely. Buenos dias, the older one said. We received a complaint about unauthorized surveillance and possible violation of privacy laws. Carlos stood, shoulders stiff. This is a misunderstanding, he said quickly. Our firm operates within all applicable regulations. We have a contract with the client. Do you also have a warrant to intercept this man's private camera feeds? The younger officer asked. To monitor his property without his knowledge? Carlos hesitated just a fraction of a second too long. The older officer noticed. We will need to see your paperwork, he said. Contracts, authorizations. If everything is in order, there is no problem. If not... He let the sentence dangle like a noose. The van driver shifted his weight, suddenly less sure of himself. I watched all of this from my armchair, the same way I'd watched contractors argue about budgets for decades, and felt something like satisfaction begin to warm the cold place in my chest. Because this was only step 1. The real revenge wasn't for the men in my living room. It was for the woman who had hired them. You ever have that moment when you realize the people you raised don't see you as a person anymore, just as a wallet with a pulse? That's where I was sitting, and I was done being the wallet. Think about it for a second. Your own daughter secretly hires strangers in another country to shadow you, dig into your finances, and look for signs that you've lost your mind. Also, she can help you manage your assets. If you discovered that, what would you do next? Carlos and his driver spent the next hour answering questions, while the officers took notes and made calls. I provided coffee. When the older officer asked if I wanted to file a formal complaint, I said yes. Absolutely yes. By the time they left, Carlos's confident posture had eroded. He promised, through tight lips, that his firm would suspend all activity related to my case until the situation was clarified. I walked them to the gate. The van felt smaller in the bright light. We work for many foreign families, Carlos said quietly before getting into his SUV. They only want what is best for their elders. Then they should start by telling them the truth, I said, and maybe by visiting instead of spying. He didn't answer. The vehicles rolled down the hill, leaving only dust and the distant sound of cicadas. For the first time in days, there was no white van outside my gate. It was almost disappointing. Almost. That night, I poured myself a better wine, something with a label I couldn't pronounce, and opened my laptop. I had emails to send. First, to a lawyer in Valencia recommended by the older Guardia Civil officer, a man with a reputation for being patient with foreigners and ruthless with everyone else. I attached a detailed statement, screenshots from my cameras, and every text Amy had sent about something happening. Second, to my investment manager back in the States. I told him, in clear terms, that any power of attorney requests with my name on them should be treated as fraudulent unless I appeared in his office in person. Not a video call, not an email, in person. Third, to Amy herself. My email was short. Amy, I know about the security firm. Tomorrow I'm going to my Spanish lawyer to update my will and property arrangements. If you want to be part of that conversation, you will call me in the next 24 hours and tell me the truth. Dad. I stared at the cursor blinking at the end of my name, then hit send before I could second-guess myself. The call came 12 minutes later. Dad, she said breathless, as if she'd been running. What did you do? Carlos just called me in a panic. He said you brought the police to your house. Good, I said. Then he can explain how he got into my cameras. I hired them for your safety, she said quickly. You're alone in a foreign country. You're vulnerable. Stop, I said. We both know that if you were concerned about my safety, you would have told me from the beginning. You wouldn't be sending them my bank details and asking for signals that I'm losing my grip. I saw the file, Amy, with your name on it. Silence. Then, quieter. Dad, you don't understand how complicated international estates are. If something happens to you over there, it could take years to sort out. I was just trying to make sure. You were trying to make sure you could prove I wasn't competent to make my own decisions, I said. So you could manage things. Sell what you wanted. Keep what you wanted. That's not fair, she snapped. You're the one who moved halfway around the world without telling us until the papers were already signed. You're impulsive, Dad. You always have been. Mom was the one who planned. Your mother wanted me to be happy, I said. She told me, before she died, to stop living like a man waiting in a doctor's office. This villa is the first thing I've done for myself in years. You don't get to turn it into a case file. On the other end of the line, I heard her swallow. We're drowning in student loans and mortgage payments, she said finally, voice shaking. It's not like it was for you and Mom. The world is different now. I thought if I could just manage things, then when the time came, we'd be okay. All of us. I was trying to be responsible. Responsible doesn't mean secretive, I said. It doesn't mean treating your father like a liability. I didn't know how to talk to you about it, she whispered. You're so stubborn. You would have said no. You're right, I said. I would have. We sat in silence, the Atlantic cable between us carrying nothing but the sound of our breathing. Dad, she said at last, what are you going to do? I'm going to make sure no one can ever do this to me again, I said. Not you, not Michael, not some security firm with a van and a camera. Meaning what? Meaning tomorrow I sign my Spanish will, I said. The villa goes into a trust controlled by a lawyer here, with very specific conditions. You and your brother will have no access to it until after I die, and even then, only if you meet those conditions. And I will be changing my American will, too. Her breath hitched. What conditions? That you treat me like a person while I'm still alive, I said. Regular calls, visits, not surveillance. No secret contracts with strangers. And if any court petition appears anywhere claiming I'm incapable, you're out. Completely. Everything goes to the grandchildren and a charity my lawyer will choose. You can't do that, she said automatically. I already am, I said calmly. My appointment is at 9. Dad, please, she said. We just wanted to feel secure. You can't punish us for trying to be prepared. I'm not punishing you for being prepared, I said. I'm punishing you for thinking you could erase me before I was dead. She started crying then, the harsh, panicked sobbing of someone watching a spreadsheet implode. Please don't do this, she said. We need, you need to learn that money you don't respect will destroy you, I said. I taught you how to ride a bike by letting you fall. Maybe this is the same thing. Dad, I love you, I said, and I meant it. But I love myself enough now not to live in fear of what your next clever idea will cost me. I hung up before she could answer. The next morning, I sat in a wood-paneled office in Valencia while a lawyer translated every clause of the trust document into slow, careful English. The villa would remain mine until I died or chose to sell it. The income from my investments would be managed through a local account, shielded from any foreign power of attorney signed under duress. The grandchildren were named as contingent beneficiaries, with my lawyer as trustee. Amy and Michael were in there, but hanging by a thread, the conditions spelled out in black ink with all the cold precision I'd spent a career admiring in load calculations and stress diagrams. If either of your children initiates guardianship proceedings against you without medical necessity, the lawyer read, they forfeit all rights to any assets under this trust. Do you understand and accept this? Oh, I understand, I said. And I accept. I signed. My hand shook a little, not from age this time, but from the weight of what I was doing. On my way out, I sent a final email to Amy and Michael with a scanned copy of the key page. No threats, no commentary, just plain information. This is how it will be from now on. 2 weeks later, Michael flew out to visit, carrying an apology and a bottle of bourbon you couldn't buy in Spain. He'd had no part in Amy's plan, but he'd known about her pressure campaign for power of attorney and kept quiet. We sat on the terrace until 2 a.m., talking about fear and aging and the way kids worry about parents and money until they forget those parents aren't just numbers in an account. Amy didn't come. She sent a long email instead, half explanation, half confession, with a promise to cut ties with the security firm and a plea to reconsider the trust conditions. I told her I'd think about it if her actions changed, not just her words. As for the van, I saw it one more time. A month later, as I walked down to the beach, it rolled past on the main road. A different driver this time, and a company logo painted hastily over the blank doors. Our eyes met for a second. There was no malice there now, just professional recognition and a hint of embarrassment. Then it was gone. Now, most days, the only vehicles that park near my gate are delivery scooters and the neighbor's tiny car when he comes over to watch soccer and argue about politics I barely understand. I sit on the terrace in the evenings, listening to the sea and the rustle of palm leaves, and my cameras are pointed where I want them to be, not where someone else thinks they should. Sometimes I think about that first week in Spain, about how quickly peace turned into paranoia, and how that paranoia turned into clarity. My daughter thought she could control my life from 3,000 miles away. The security firm thought an old man in a foreign country would be easy to manage. They all forgot that getting old doesn't mean getting weak. It just means you've had more time to learn how to fight back without raising your voice. So that's what I did. I used the only leverage I really had left, my money, my property, my signature. And I aimed it right where it would hurt most, not to destroy my family, but to force them to see me as something other than a walking inheritance. Now I'm asking you, was I right to cut them off unless they changed? Or did I go too far when I turned their own surveillance and greed into my revenge?
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.